Okay, hi. I'm
No.
Joy.
Oh,
Hi, that's right.
sorry, darling.
Hi, I'm Joyce Bock from Salubrious Events. We specialize in topics on the outer edge, but has the potential of being great benefit to our well-being. And today I'm really excited to talk to Charlotte Ellery, who will be discussing about happy hormones, how to trigger your happy hormones naturally and without drugs.
Mhm.
So, Charlotte Ellery is a certified yoga instructor. She has a master's of education and specializes in bringing neuroscience to life. She has worked as a primary school teacher, a deputy principal, a prison education teacher, an educational consultant, and EQ coach. But her greatest achievement is being a mum, and that's the most challenging of all.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for doing this interview with me.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, can you explain to me what I assume this is mind medicine. So, what
Yes.
is mind medicine, and what are happy hormones all about?
Okay, so the happy hormones are the neurotransmitters that we all have in our brain. When they're in our brain, we call them neurotransmitters. And then when they go through our body, we call them hormones, but essentially it's the same molecule. Mind medicines is just a word that I use to make that concept more accessible, that there are these chemicals that are in our brain that we produce and they do wonderful things for our mind. And with a little bit of understanding, we can have some conscious control over the chemical cocktail that we are creating for ourselves in each moment every day. So that's the mind medicines. Yes.
Are you saying we've got it all inside our bodies?
I'm saying we've got it all inside our bodies. Yes. Sometimes we just need to crack the code to get those molecules to connect in the way that we want them to. But yes, it's all here.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get into this field?
Okay. Probably the real answer for that is when I was 12, a friend of mine who was 18, a girl that I looked up to, tragically took her own life. And I'll never forget it. I was completely confused. I had never encountered suicide at that point. I didn't understand it. And I was trying to work out what the hell had happened and how somebody could do that and what was going on for this girl in the weeks preceding that decision. And um, I'll never forget at the funeral, I went up to the minister who knew both of us, and I said to her, "What happened? Like, why did she do this?" And the minister looked at me and she said, "There was a chemical imbalance in her brain." And that just filled me with like 1,000 questions. And I was like, what are the chemicals in our brain? What's a chemical imbalance? What does it mean to be balanced? What is it, does my mum have these chemicals? Do I have these chemicals? And it just, I knew it at that moment, it wasn't appropriate to ask all those questions. But for me, it was the intensity of the curiosity into that tragedy that really sparked this desire to understand what these chemicals are and how they can be so powerful and how they can influence us in such profound ways to, tragically in that case, someone to take their own life, but also inspire us in the opposite direction to live life to the full and to experience joy. So that was the beginning. That was like the seed. And then 20 years later, I was at Murdoch University and I was studying my master's in education. And we were looking at the brains of kids with ADHD, and we started getting into these chemicals that these kids have. And I was learning about dopamine and serotonin and cortisol and all these different chemicals. And I kind of went, hang on a second, this isn't just ADD kids. This is all of us. We all have these chemicals. And then the light bulb switched on and I went, that's what the reference was at that funeral. And then I quickly ordered some books online to gobble up as much information as I could, and I couldn't wait for them to come, so I downloaded the books and I remember sitting there in my yard just reading. It was a Loretta Bruning book, Meet Your Happy Chemicals, and just going, I was reading and looking at my family members going, oh, right now you're doing this, you're trying to get this chemical, or right now you're releasing this in your system. And it became apparent to me as I was reading that book that everything we say and do, every action that we take is because of these chemicals. So that would have been 8 years ago, I think. When my son was 2, and it was also his journey with chemicals, which were obviously quite profound as a 2-year-old. I really needed to understand what was going on for him. So that's been the journey too. He's now 10. So, yeah.
Wow. Yes, it's such a tragic incident that has fueled your desire to learn more and find out what really happened, which has turned into something so, really beneficial for people to understand. Tell me more about these hormones.
Okay, so there's 4 that I mainly focus on in my teaching. So there's thousands of them, but from what I can tell, if we understand these 4, it will set us up for the other ones to flow in a healthy way. So the 4 I really focus on in my teaching is cortisol, which is the stress, fight, flight, freeze, often works with adrenaline, puts us into the anxious, angry kind of state. So that one's not a happy chemical. And then the other 3 that I look at is oxytocin, which is sometimes called the cuddle hormone or the love drug. Dopamine, all about focus and being really sharp and on a mission and alert and bright. And then serotonin, which helps us feel confident, we feel empowered. And when it's flowing well, we have a calm capacity to be a leader if it's required. So they're the 4 that I really look at in my work. Yeah.
Are there activities that really trigger these hormones? So what activities to do and not to do for each one of those?
Yes, absolutely. And we could spend like a day on each one. But in a nutshell, what triggers my cortisol? Like when my dog goes mental, barking at the postman, I kind of like, with all my yin yoga and all my meditation practice, when my dog goes off, I can't yet control that response completely. So with cortisol, it's more any practice that's going to help us be calm is going to help us lower our baseline cortisol levels. So deep breathing, breathing into the back and bottom of our lungs and breathing slow. That's probably the most instant and powerful way to alter our cortisol levels. And it's why breath work is so important in so many spiritual traditions. When we're hungry, our cortisol levels will naturally go up. Hangry, you might have heard of that, the hungry, angry kind of combo. When we're low blood sugar, anything that will make us feel stressed is going to trigger that cortisol response. So for me, I try and be really aware of my shoulders, because when my shoulders start to come up, that's my cue that my cortisol levels are coming up. And so for me, it's and I feel better. Yeah. Yeah. So the relationship between our sternum and our shoulder position is quite important to our mental health. So it's a biofeedback into the brain. When we hunch and our shoulders come up, cortisol goes up and serotonin goes down, which is anxiety, basically. We want the opposite, which is sternum forward, shoulders back, and like an openness. And then our serotonin will start to come up and our cortisol will start to come down. Yeah, so that's cortisol. Next one, oxytocin, which is my favorite one. We have receptors all over our body for oxytocin, but over 50% of them are in our heart, in our physical heart. So skin on skin contact is one of the best releases of oxytocin, which obviously at the moment with the pandemic, a lot of people are a bit low on their human contact. We're not hugging, we're not shaking hands, we're not having that physical contact as much as normal. We do still get oxytocin from stroking animals, dogs and cats, and the animal also gets it. All mammals have this chemical. Eye contact, actually, especially when we feel safe and we make eye contact with another person, oxytocin will start to flow. So if there's a person that you feel safe with, if you can just sit down with them and hold eye contact for say 3 minutes, put the timer on, just sit there and breathe, you'll notice your breathing will start to come in sync naturally. And really amazing things can happen if you just sit with someone that you trust and let the oxytocin start to enter the feedback loop. That's really cool. Anything that we do that's in the best interest of another human. So this is our real tribal instinct. This is that we work together as a team. This is we look after each other, we protect each other, we come together as a team. That's going to release oxytocin. So a shared sense of mission. So even being on a sports team with a group of people, and again, that's not happening at the moment in the smaller groups, but I do feel more than ever we are experiencing humanity as a single team. And we're kind of going, oh, wow, we are all in this together. I had a beautiful oxytocin moment yesterday. I was teaching in the prisons, one of the women's prisons, my wellbeing classes, and the women's choir were given permission to go to the fence, the sideline fence, and on the other side of the fence is a big old people's home, and of course all the old people are in isolation, but they're allowed to come out onto their balconies. And so we could look up and we could see like 30 or 40 elderly people sitting on the balconies, and they had balloons and their carers were with them. And the women sang these songs about being together and all being in it together and sharing the joy no matter what's happening in life. And it was this incredible, everybody's oxytocin was lifting as we experienced these people connecting in spite of adversity. And that's one thing that's really powerful about oxytocin, is that when things are tough, if we bond together and work as a team, oxytocin can increase even if our stress levels are up. So heaps of people were in tears, which is a natural response when oxytocin comes up, or down. We will cry either way. So this was like the happy tears of seeing these elderly people and prisoners sharing music together. Yeah, it was beautiful.
That's just, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very special. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What was the other one?
Okay, so we did cortisol, the stress one, oxytocin, the love one.
Uh-huh.
Giving birth actually is just after giving birth. If things went well and the mother felt safe and empowered, oxytocin will go through the roof in that bonding moment when you look at your child's eyes for the first time. That'll be a huge spike. The other thing is, and this is something women should be aware of, orgasm is a huge spike in oxytocin for women.
Oh.
Always for women. Every orgasm for a woman is a huge spike in oxytocin, which is naturally going to lead to those bonding type behaviours, the wanting to be close to someone, wanting to look after them, wanting to be looked after, all those kind of nurturing instincts. But a man can have an orgasm without releasing oxytocin. So dopamine and serotonin and a few other things will really spike for him in the orgasm, but not necessarily oxytocin. So meaning, of course, if a man and a woman have an incredible sexual experience together, the woman is inevitably going to start to fall in love with the man and want to be close to him. The man won't necessarily have the same response, which, you know, no judgment there. Maybe it makes it easier for us to forgive the man, but also to understand ourselves and to not have incredible sexual experiences with people unless we kind of know that they're going to provide those other instincts too, the nurturing and the protection and those things. So that's a good one, right?
Explanation for what happens
Yeah.
in relationships with women.
Yeah. And, and if a woman wants to go and have, if she's on Tinder and she wants to go and have a one-night stand, like, it's totally fine. But she just needs to be aware the next day her oxytocin will have peaked, and she might be looking for some of those experiences. And if they're not there, she might feel hurt or sad or whatever. There's still things she can do to get her oxytocin in other ways, like sharing a meal with someone. Doesn't have to be him. Random acts of kindness, doing things for the well-being of other. I think one of the coolest things about oxytocin is that it primes us to enter the experience of another human being. So the part of our brain, like right now I'm here and I'm in my body and I'm having my experience and I can see what I can see. But then because of oxytocin and this prefrontal cortex, I can look at you, Joy, and I can go, oh, this is maybe what Joy's experiencing right now. And if your face was like, if you were frowning, or if I was picking up distress, I might actually feel some of your distress inside of my own system. And likewise, if I see you and you're open and you look happy, I'll unconsciously pick up those cues and I'll actually feel some of your joy inside of me. And I think, wow, like that's cool. So this capacity that humans have for empathy and to see things through someone else's eyes, like, we're not always accurate, but we can do it. That's a uniquely human capacity. So, and that's a lot of what I teach, is trying to see things from other people's points of view. And it's a learnable skill. And if we were given a very nurturing childhood with lots of oxytocin and lots of cuddles and carers who responded to us, this part of our brain will have naturally grown and it will be easier for us to do. But if our mum was distracted and busy and stressed and she didn't have much oxytocin going, and maybe in those first 3 years we weren't given much physical contact, it's a learnable skill. We can all learn it, but some people have a bit of an advantage, I guess. And it's the whole nature nurture thing. Some people seem to just be born with high levels of baseline oxytocin, some people with less. But all of my training is about what can we do to increase these chemicals. So taking care of people, sharing food, patting animals, being part of a team, all those things.
It's really a bonding hormone.
Yeah.
It really helps us bond.
Yes.
And so for a man, what triggers his oxytocin?
We could do a big long talk on relationships, right? The same things like physical contact, affection, sharing food, having a shared sense of mission, the sense that we are looking after each other, we've got each other's back. Maybe if we go through dopamine and serotonin, then if we talk about relationships, it might make sense. So I'll skip to dopamine, yeah?
Yeah.
Dopamine is totally different type of joy to oxytocin. Oxytocin is really soft and lovey-dovey and fluffy and all that. Dopamine, no. Dopamine is, I'm on a mission, I've got a job to do, I've got goals. It's about having a focus and a target, and we lose peripheral vision when our dopamine's up. So it's all about being bright and alert and sharp and quick. And it probably came from the evolutionary instinct. Like if we were kind of living in the jungle and there was a berry on this really difficult branch to get to, the humans with high dopamine would have been like, all right, I'm going to figure out a way to get that. The humans with low dopamine would have gone, let's just sit here and eat other things. But the high dopamine humans, and there's specific genes that trigger this, would have gone, I can do it, I'm going to go. So there's this alertness and mission that comes with high dopamine levels. And it's really fun. I do really like dopamine. I don't like having low dopamine. So when we're low dopamine, we're kind of like, we're bored, we're sluggish. It's like, it feels like there's no point in doing anything, like everything's just a waste of time, and what's the point, right? And then the types of thoughts we'll have when our dopamine's really low. We just want to be like low to the ground and horizontal and don't want to move. We lose muscle tone. So if people want to get their dopamine up, for example, I've dropped the kids off at school. It's my day off. I come home. My task is to clean the house. And I open the door and I go, oh my God, the house is trashed. And I go, oh, this sucks. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to do this. This is really boring. And so, Laura, what's the point? They're just going to mess it up again anyway. You know, having all that's low dopamine. I do not like that. So what can I do to get my dopamine up? Firstly, have a drink of water, because if we're dehydrated, quite hard to make dopamine. Secondly, go for a walk, and not an amble, a brisk walk with a mission. So you can see a tree in 50 meters, like walk like you're on a mission. And if you do that for 2 minutes, dopamine will come up. So walking in a straight line like you're on a mission will get dopamine up. Music, I think we all know, a live, vibrant music picks our dopamine up. And then breaking the task down into achievable goals. So for me, going, I have to clean the whole house, it just feels overwhelming and my brain won't release dopamine. But if I break it down to a smaller task, like, okay, I'm going to clean the kitchen. And then I give myself a really clear vision of the task being complete. Then I'll go, right, I can do this. And I've got my music going and I'm hydrated and hopefully my blood sugar levels are decent. Caffeine does release dopamine. It is a drug. So you do habituate to it and then it loses effectiveness. But that feeling you get, some of us get from a coffee, that's dopamine in our system. So, and again, sleep. If you haven't had enough sleep, really hard to make dopamine. They're probably the biggest ones. And tyrosine. So any foods that have tyrosine in them, so like bananas, avocados, almonds, we need tyrosine in our system to make dopamine in our brain. So healthy food. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd probably just add to that, for me, Joy, I think I've realized over the years that once my dopamine is in line with my oxytocin, as in my goals are in line with my heart, my perseverance is so much greater. So if I'm doing a task without oxytocin, it's only so long that I can do that for. But once the two are in alignment, it's like this powerhouse that kicks in for us and will overcome any obstacle once our oxytocin and our dopamine are moving together. So I've noticed that for me, and I'm guessing that's true for many of us. And we kind of know that we don't want to be that workaholic that's burnt out at 55 and questions the meaning of life, but has all these goals ticked off if it's all a bit meaningless. So I think we're figuring something out collectively here, that the work we do professionally and our goals, they need to have some depth to really help us drive through the challenges and the obstacles.
Yeah, definitely. I think passion, we need that passion and the meaning, some sort of meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
And the love and those emotions to drive us. Yeah, definitely. That really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So with cortisol, do we need a little bit of that at times? And
well, in Cortisol 101, I say all the techniques are to reduce cortisol, because I would say most of us could do with a lot less cortisol. However, once you've mastered being able to drop your cortisol, yes, we can actually use anger and even rage as a really strong motivating factor. And if you think about like things in the world that are really unjust and you feel like a fire inside you, again, if you can link that up with your dopamine, with your goals for the day, that's really powerful what we can do. So yeah, I definitely do think it's a skill. And I always teach cortisol reduction first. And then once we've got that, then yes, absolutely. Cortisol has its place in our system. I guess we just don't want it on all the time. We want it, it's healthy for it to kind of come up, but then we need to know how to turn it off. We don't want to be living 24/7 with elevated cortisol levels. It's quite unhealthy. Yeah, good question. I like it. Do you want to hear about serotonin? Because this might yeah. So serotonin is the third chemical. It's the one that most antidepressants focus on, so SSRIs. They're trying to increase the level of serotonin in the body. So when our serotonin is high, we feel confident, we feel empowered, we like who we are. So our self-esteem is quite high, and we have that sense that I've got what it takes to do this, I'm capable. So there's this quite optimistic self-perception when our serotonin's up. When it's down, our self-esteem goes down. We don't really like who we are. We don't feel that we've got what it takes to get the job done, and we get like a shaky feeling inside. So 80% of our serotonin receptors are in our gastrointestinal tract, in our tummy. So often, you know, when we feel anxious and we get shaky in our tummy, there's not enough serotonin going through the system. So some evidence to suggest that as a generalization, especially before the age of 40, women tend to be oxytocin dominant in their disposition. Men tend to be serotonin dominant in their disposition up until about 40. And then many men will switch at that point. And that's possibly part of their spiritual journey, is to learn how to ascend and to become really competent, but then learn how to switch and realize if they actually want to have meaning in their life, it needs, all those competencies need to be given back to the next generation, and it needs to be a sense of surrender and a passing on of all that power and capability that they've developed. So ways to get our serotonin up. Sunlight actually is a really good one. Sunlight, love it. Again, sleep. So serotonin is melatonin and tryptophan come together to make serotonin. So melatonin, when we sleep really well, we have lots of melatonin in our brains. We wake up in the morning. If we go outside, stretch, let the sunlight or natural light hit our retinas, the back of our eye, that will start the process of converting melatonin into serotonin. So we'll start to get the feeling of well-being. And if we combine that with exercise, so waking up in the morning, getting outside into natural light and exercising is really going to trigger the serotonin production for the day. So for a lot of people, it's quite fundamental to their serotonin levels to exercise in the morning. Again, some people are just born with really consistent serotonin, and other people are like really affected by the external. So whenever we win something, yes, that's a classic serotonin maneuver to make ourselves big. So lobsters do this, animals do this. Whenever they feel powerful, they make themselves big. And us, just by doing this, there's some research, there's a bit of toing and froing with this one, but I can feel it in my own system. If I stand like this for 2 minutes, especially if I'm thinking positive thoughts, like I can do this. I'm a smart, intelligent woman. I've got what it takes to do this. I come out of that 2 minutes and I feel empowered. There's no anxiety left in me if I do that. So like before, say if I'm speaking at in a place where I might feel anxious, like I spoke at UWA to a bunch of really intelligent people and I was feeling a bit anxious. So I went up to the toilet, I closed the door and I stood there for 2 minutes. I got my cortisol level down. I got my serotonin level up, and then I was able to come into that presentation feeling clear and feeling calm and feeling like I had what it takes to communicate something that was going to be of benefit to them. So sunlight, exercise, especially muscle building exercise, like core strength, like kind of exercise. Foods with tryptophan in it. So the easiest ways to get tryptophan is animal products. So turkey is one of the biggest ones, salmon, eggs. For vegetarians like yourself, there's seaweed, spinach, and we need magnesium to help that process happen. So anything with green, dark green leafy vegetables. So the easiest ways to get it is proteins and animal products, but there are other ways that we can get that tryptophan into our body for that process to happen. A super powerful one, which again, I think we all know, but once you understand the science, it's our thinking. So we've got the thinking center in our brain is over here on the left, and the pineal gland is the gland that coordinates the production of both dopamine and serotonin. And there's a super highway of neural pathways between our language center and our pineal gland. So when we say things like, oh, I'm so crap, I'm such a loser, I just haven't got what it takes to do this. I'm just going to get rejected at every point. So our pineal gland goes, oh, okay, and it stops making serotonin, right? But likewise, if we go, I can do this, I know what to do, I'm competent, I'm capable, and then you think about all the training that you've done, all the problems that you've solved in the past, your pineal gland will go, oh, okay, and it'll start producing serotonin. So I have these regular debates with people, kind of like which one comes first, because when your serotonin's high, you'll naturally think positive thoughts. And when your serotonin's low, you'll naturally think negative thoughts. So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, which one comes first. And I have one amazing wellbeing teacher I know, he's adamant that thinking comes first. Whereas I'm pretty sure for me, I have to get outside in the sunlight, I have to exercise, I have to eat decent food. And once I do all those things, I'll naturally think positive thoughts. So you can decide for yourself, Joy, which you think.
I think I'm feelings first. I think that's more dominant for me. But maybe some people are more cerebral, but advertising, they aim at emotions and feelings because that just seems so much more powerful. Motivation.
And this is one thing, this gets me fired up, right? So when I was year 9, so this is, I don't know, 1992 or something, the really cool thing to have at Craigie Senior High School was these Reebok pumps. And I don't know if you remember them, but they had like a little, and you like pumped it up, and the girls' ones were white and they had like apricot shoelaces, and they were just so beautiful. And for me in year 9, my urge for serotonin, as in my awareness of where I was in a hierarchy, because serotonin primes us to scan for hierarchy and check where we are in it, right? Oxytocin doesn't do that. Oxytocin does not care about status. Oxytocin just sees circles of support. But serotonin is like, okay, there's a pecking order, and where am I in that pecking order? So this really kicked in for me in year 9. And I wanted to be at the top of the pecking order, or somewhere up there. And I really wanted these shoes because I could feel that they would increase my status in that community. So I went home and I said to my mum, Mum, can I get these Reebok pumps? They're so cool. And my mum looks at me and she goes, no, your shoes from Big Dub are fine. No, I'm not buying them. And it was like, oh, like I felt it in my guts. And I remember going to school the next day, looking at my crappy Big Dub shoes and just feeling like I was never going to be able to climb the hierarchy, right? So now I look back at that and it kind of pisses me off, because somehow Reebok had hacked into my brain and had convinced me that these shoes were going to give me serotonin, that feeling of well-being and empowerment that I was looking for as a year 9 girl. And Reebok doesn't care about my well-being. Reebok doesn't care about where I get my serotonin from. They just wanted me to fork out money, basically, to buy the drug serotonin from them. And that's what all advertisers do. That's what all advertising is about, is trying to convince us that if we buy this product, we'll get this feeling of high status. And that really annoys me, because I don't want companies that don't care about my kids, that don't care about my kids' friends, that don't care about my daughter's self-esteem, hacking into her system and convincing her the only way to get serotonin is by spending her money in these particular ways. So it's quite important to me that teenagers understand serotonin and that they become aware of where they're getting their serotonin from. So now I'm 40, I feel much more at peace with where I get my serotonin from. So I choose where I get my serotonin from. For example, now, if I make a meal, put it on the table, and before I just kind of gobble it up before really thinking about it, but now I go, okay, that meal, it's got protein, it's got veggies, it's healthy, it's yummy, it's going to create a sense of connectedness within people that I care about. And then I go, yes, I get my serotonin from that, right? So I'm choosing which experiences I get serotonin from, as opposed to being programmed by these companies that don't really care about me. So yeah, that's a big one.
That's a really, really good point. And I think, yeah, the whole being really, really aware and mindful and critically analyze.
Yeah.
On TV, movies, everything like that.
Yeah.
It's so powerful though. They really hook you in, and
yeah,
Game of Thrones really hooked me in. Like even if it's fear or the powerful serotonin of those characters doing such powerful things despite adversity. So right. So you're saying teaching teenagers and children. What are some things that you do with your kids? Just some simple basic things.
Well, if a member of the family is clearly craving serotonin, e.g. showing off, I say to said member of the family, do you need some serotonin right now? How would you like to get your serotonin right now? And we've been using this language with the kids since they were quite small, so they're really aware. But kids learn this so easily. I've done this with year ones. I just had a message. I did a workshop 3 years ago with, it's the same age as my son, so he would have been 7. And then just this week, he went up to his mum and said, "Mum, I need a cuddle." She gave him a cuddle, and he goes, "Oh, oxytocin is so good." And she messaged me and she said, "That was from your workshop 3 years ago." Like he's using that language. So I think kids, they actually pick it up pretty quick. But so getting them to be aware of where their serotonin is coming from, getting them to work towards difficult goals, and then praising them once they've overcome obstacles. So it's not like my daughter, she's so pretty. She's really pretty. She has these eyelashes that are like, but I try not to, I don't want her getting her serotonin from something that she didn't do anything. She hasn't worked hard for that. She was just born with that. So I don't want to overly focus. I don't want her getting her serotonin too much from her looks. And I think for us as women, we have been possibly conditioned to look for serotonin through what we look like quite a bit. And I would like to kind of diversify that. And again, I think this is part of the spiritual journey. This is part of the aging process, is that we surrender some of those ways of getting serotonin and go, okay, I don't need to be attached to my serotonin coming from me looking like a particular image. And I can get serotonin from other ways through competencies and through what I can give back.
Right. What about adults who are, say, depressed?
Yes. Okay, so I'm not a psychologist, you're a psychologist. So if someone is really depressed, like they should go and see a psychologist, right? So the advice I'm giving is more, the kind of middle of the range sort of people who maybe don't need to see a psychologist, but there are things they can do. So someone who's depressed, I would say get the stress levels down, because when it's sort of like a cauldron, when our brain is full of cortisol, it's very difficult for the other chemicals to come through. So the oxytocin and the dopamine and the serotonin kind of don't have room because we become completely fight, flight, freeze dominant. So trying to get the stress down might be the starter. Then looking at the dopamine levels, if you can do something, just something to get the dopamine flowing. Like, I know when you're depressed, you don't want to go to the gym for an hour. Like, that's really hard. But maybe you can walk down to the end of the street. Maybe you can give yourself a small goal, like, right, I'm going to do the dishes. I don't even have the energy to clean the whole kitchen, but I'll just do the dishes. And then sometimes just achieving those little goals can get just enough dopamine flowing that it can start to turn into a positive feedback loop. So, and I would say water, the amount of times I think, oh my gosh, I'm so depressed. And then I have a drink of water and then I feel better. Like at that, and I know for many of my friends that's true. And they're all like grumpy and dark, and you're like, drink water. And then the disposition, it changes, you know. So I do think just keeping an eye on those little things like water intake, healthy food, they can make way more difference than some people realize, and really big for some people. And then, of course, again, serotonin and dopamine are both low for someone with depression. Someone with anxiety will be really low serotonin and high cortisol. So someone with anxiety, I would say start with trying to reduce the cortisol. So that would be working with the breath, meditating, yin yoga, gentle yoga, and just letting the cortisol levels, and then maybe the parasympathetic nervous system will kick in. There's a lot of, polyvagal theory. I don't know if that's something that psychologists are into, this whole idea that this vagus nerve that's part of that parasympathetic response, there's things we can do to trigger that, which are going to help us feel a lot less anxious. And then the idea of polyvagal tone, and that people with better vagal tone can come out of the anxiety state or the fight, flight, freeze state more easily and quicker. And it's a learnable skill. Again, it's like learning to ride a bike. We don't just naturally know how to do that. And this is another one with parenting, especially little kids when they have massive tantrums and they're just like totally let loose and they're absolutely devastated or terrified, or they have these huge emotions. Learning how to come out of that state and back into a calm state neurologically is quite a long bridge. Like you're trying to get them to go right from the back of their brain and come to the front of their brain, prefrontal cortex, which they don't even really have developed until they're like 20. So it's a really big ask, especially when you're yelling like, calm down, so really what we need to do there with those kids who are in those heightened states of anxiety or fear or terror or rage or whatever is be with them and demonstrate to them, with them, kind of take them on that journey. So letting them, they might be, say if they're sitting in their room and they're screaming and they're crying and you're with them. And sometimes I would cry too, I would just pick it up and I would feel upset and angry, even if it's something totally illogical. Like once my son wanted 2 moons in the sky. He wanted me to make another moon and he went into fits of rage because I wouldn't create a second moon for him. Anyway, so the trigger is irrelevant. It's the state that we enter, right? So it's being with them in the dark, keeping them close and breathing and just allowing and just trusting that there is a natural way out of that state if it's given space, breathing, calm, and eventually they will, they'll do it and their nervous system will come back. And so for me, when the tantrums at the beginning, I found hugely triggering and I wanted to control them. But then I realized, okay, I've got to actually build this bridge for them from those heightened states to calm, and I actually just need to be with them and breathe with them, and eventually they will come back. And so you do that 100 times, 200 times, 300 times, and then it's a skill that's been learned. So, yeah, learnable skill.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very practical too, you know, all the things that you're saying. And yeah, so it sounds like it's really good to supplement, like it's a whole multifaceted in terms of well-being. To maintain our well-being, we need a whole lot of strategies, and it's all multifaceted. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I think when we're kids, we just kind of like all these things, you know, just things come through us. And then as we become adults and we develop this kind of theory of mind or self-awareness, we start to go, actually, I can kind of steer this ship. It's sort of like I think of it, you know, we're like a huge boat, huge cruise liner going through the ocean, and we're heading in a direction. And sometimes it's just like this tiny, gentle hand, just maybe it's only a centimetre difference. So you just do one thing, like drink a bit more water, and then you're heading off in a slightly different direction. But 10 years' time, you've gone somewhere completely different. I think that's the way I see it. I don't have to make these massive changes in my life all at once. It's just like every day, gently skimming past the bow of the ship to help it go in the right direction, the direction I want to go, life to the full. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love that metaphor. So what services do you offer? Tell me about your workshops.
So we do corporate wellbeing, so how to thrive in stressful work environments. We do, that one's really cool because there's a lot of business owners out there and CEOs. They don't want to like wring out the last bit of production they can get out of their workers. We've all actually realized that people work best when they're well, when they're mentally well. So when people are healthy, when they feel connected, when they feel like they're part of a team, when they feel like they're on a mission and doing something meaningful and important and that's good for the world, and they feel empowered, that who workers are is totally different than when they're feeling low oxytocin, low dopamine, low serotonin. So we're getting to this stage now corporately where corporate wellbeing is becoming really important because it also increases productivity and creative problem solving and collaboration, all those things that we need. And the bosses of workers are not just trying to make them work harder. They're not just trying to turn them into like slave robots. They're actually caring about them as human beings. And so the workshops we offer in corporate spaces, it's focused on increased productivity, but it's a holistic approach to human well-being, how to help people thrive in stressful work environments. Like we've done it in IT companies, we've done work with prison officers, various places where people experience challenges, building companies, any workplace that's going to be stressed out sometimes. We also do education in schools. So we've gone from kindy right through to year 12. We do how to succeed in year 12 with your mental well-being, getting all those chemicals off, and how to make the most of your dopamine so that when you're studying, you're really switched on, and how to use breaks, like go, 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 go. You can't really keep dopamine up all day. It seems to be about the 40-minute mark. Most people will actually have to completely take themselves away from whatever task they're doing if it's a task that's really difficult and requires heightened concentration. So we look at planning study breaks and completely removing yourself, and so you can come back and be super sharp and avoid that kind of afternoon slump. I do a lot of work in the prisons with addiction, because all of these chemicals I've been talking about, illegal substances can trigger them, and they use the receptor cells, like methamphetamines use the serotonin receptor cells. So that's why people feel really powerful when they're on it, but then when they come off it, the serotonin levels will stay really low for between 6 months and 5 years. So how can we help people build their serotonin up again because when it's low, they're more likely to turn to the illegal drugs because it's really uncomfortable being low serotonin. So, yeah. Things. My business partner, Janine, is amazing. Yeah. So we often co-present, her and I together.
Okay. Well, you're doing amazing work, Charlotte. And so your website's called thedisciplineofbliss.com.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the below. And you've also got a Facebook page called hackyourhappychemicals.
Yeah, it's called The Discipline of Bliss, but the hashtag is Happy Chemicals for All, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll put the link anyway. Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. I could talk to you, yeah, you know.
Oh, good. We have.
We have. And yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about relationships, you know, maybe another talk. And
that's the thing I'm currently really passionate about, is the different phases of relationships and the brain states that kick in when you meet someone, when you're falling in love. Oh my God, what happens? And then when you move out of that, because that can only last for about 3 years. So it's fascinating. But yeah, we could talk for a good hour on that.
Yes, yeah, great. All right, thank you, Charlotte. And yeah, really, really appreciate the wonderful information that you've shared with us, and we can take away and apply it in our lives. And yeah, I hope to learn more about it with you. Thank you.